month with club card prices, saving you an incredible £84. And that price is frozen for your whole contract. Join the customers who saved £9.5 million with frozen prices last year. It pays to be connected. Search Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
With Virgin Media, get smooth, lightning-fast M125 broadband. Just £25 a month and no setup fee. And now it's even easier to switch to the provider awarded Best Broadband Experience. Yeah, that's smooth. Virgin Media. See what you can do. Visit virginmedia.com.
Hi, we're talking Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power Season 2. Joining us is the stellar star cast. A very warm welcome to NDTV.
Thank you.
So we'll start as a warm-up. We'll start with some puns. Why did Sauron start a fashion line?
To wear the one ring?
You're close, because he always rings in the trends. Okay, second one.
Yeah, no, okay.
I promise it's a better one.
Okay, yeah.
What's Sauron's favorite kind of music?
This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Hello and welcome. This is the US Election Watch. I'm Osama Shab from the latest on Hurricane Milton to bringing you the latest on why the Democrats as well as the Republicans are up in arms to abolish the Electoral College system. To Kamala Harris's campaign office being shot at for the third time this month. There's a lot lined up for you, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Kamala Harris's running mate Tim Walz says Electoral College system needs to go, adding that US needs a national popular vote. Inflation in the United States reaches its lowest point since February of 2021. The consumer price index increased by 0.2% in September. Donald Trump slams CBS for editing a 60-minute chat with Kamala Harris. Trump accuses CBS, saying that illegal changes were made to make Harris look better. Harris's Arizona campaign office shot at for the third time in just a month. The shooting comes as Harris and Walz head to Arizona. And Kamala Harris raises $1 billion since launching her presidential campaign. Harris has raised $147 million more than what Trump has raised so far this year. Only 25 days to go till the US chooses its 47th president. And both the candidates, they are busy campaigning as they scramble to make their final voter pitches. Here's what on their schedule today. Vice President Kamala Harris is set to participate at a Univision town hall, Nevada's Las Vegas. Harris will then head to Arizona's Phoenix to deliver remarks at a campaign event in Chandler. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump, he is gearing up to deliver an address to the Detroit Economic Club in Michigan. As the race to the White House enters its penultimate stage, the latest Reuters and Ipsos polling reveals that Harris is leading Trump among suburban voters by 47% to 41%. Meanwhile, the latest updates about Hurricane Milton. Milton made landfall as a Category 3 storm around 8:30 p.m. local time in Florida's Siesta Key Wednesday evening, bringing with it mammoth 28-feet waves, strong winds, heavy rainfall, and a devastating storm surge. This morning, the monster storm made its way towards the Atlantic, sustaining maximum wind speeds of up to 140 kilometers per hour, meaning it's a Category 1 hurricane. At least 4 deaths have been confirmed in St. Lucie County on Florida's Atlantic coast, where officials said that tornadoes touched down ahead of the hurricane. Anticipating further flooding, Governor Ron DeSantis, he has underlined that more than 80,000 people are taking refuge in overnight shelters. Florida's police chief, he has warned that we'll be finding bodies. Moreover, around 11 million Americans, they are still at risk of flash and river flooding. Not only this, according to poweroutage.us, more than 3.3 million households have been left without electricity in Florida. Stepping up relief efforts, the Biden administration has deployed thousands of federal personnel to affected areas. They include more than 1,000 Coast Guard members. In fact, we have with us Fatu Kamara, senior journalist. All right, we'll try and get the latest from there and try to get you the latest on the Hurricane Milton's trajectory after the landfall as well. Meanwhile, moving on to the Electoral College debate that has stirred up, the Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, he has called for abolishing the Electoral College as a means of electing American presidents. During a Tuesday meeting with donors, Walz said, and I quote, "I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. We need a national popular vote." But why is Walz sniping at the Electoral College? You see, the US presidential elections, they aren't as simple as they might initially appear. When Americans, they cast their votes for president, they're not voting directly for a candidate. Instead, they're choosing electors in a system known as the Electoral College. Our next report underlines all you need to know. Take a look.
I'm back again, and the reason is because I know so many.
All right, we'll try and get you that report in just a short while from now. But joining us to discuss on this matter a little further, I'm currently joined by Robert Shapiro, political analyst, professor of political science in the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. I'm also joined by Spencer Crickley, Democrat communications strategist. Also have with us Adele Malka-Nazarian, American media personality and a political analyst. Welcome to this discussion. But before we talk about this, let's take a look at that report.
Established in 1787, the Founding Fathers created the Electoral College as a compromise between electing the president by a vote in Congress and by popular vote. In the college, each state has a set number of electors based on its congressional representation, senators, and House members. There are 538 electors total. Most states allocate all their electoral votes to the candidate who wins the majority of the popular vote in that state. Maine and Nebraska are the only exceptions with their proportional allocation. A candidate needs a majority of at least 270 electoral votes to claim the presidency. It is important to note that the college is not free of controversies. Candidates can win the presidency without winning the popular vote. We have seen this in the elections of 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, and as recent as 2016, when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton despite securing less votes. This sparks debates about fairness and representation. Campaigns focus intensely on a handful of swing states where the outcome is uncertain, often leaving out voters in states deemed safe for one party. While some advocate for abolishing the Electoral College in favor of a direct popular vote, arguing it would enhance democratic legitimacy, supporters claim it protects smaller states' interests and ensures a broader national campaign. So, what's the bottom line? The Electoral College is a fascinating blend of historical compromise and modern contention. As elections loom, the debate rages on. Is it a cornerstone of democracy or an outdated relic? Buckle up, the story is far from over. Bureau Report for NDTV World.
Well, the story is far from over, and to talk about that story, let me first go across to Spencer quickly. Spencer, as candidates, they are jolting to make their final pitches. Is there a growing difference of opinion within the Democratic camp? And of course, we are talking about Harris and Walz here.
I think that most Democrats favor the abolition of the Electoral College. Whether that's realistic anytime soon, I think, is a whole other question. But there is a widespread feeling that our electoral system not only has distortions in its representation, as were described in your report just now, but also is just so complicated that it encourages gamesmanship, for example, of the sort where campaigns tend to focus all of their attention on usually between 6 and 8 battleground states every election. So as I say, I think there's widespread feeling among Democrats and also among many Republicans and independents that it should be abolished. I just don't think that it's realistic anytime soon because it would require amending the Constitution.
Absolutely. And Adele, I want to understand from you, as a political analyst yourself, I just want to try and understand the Republican side of the story. In 2016, Trump, he won because of the Electoral College system, given he lost the popular vote. Where do the Republicans then should stand on this particular issue, according to you?
Thank you so much. Look, in my experience, I've seen that Republicans have been staunchly supportive of the Constitution. And I have to say that the Electoral College is enshrined in the Constitution, and it has been a cornerstone of American democracy for over 200 years. The Founding Fathers created the Electoral College to protect against the tyranny of the majority. And I have to say this, Tim Walz and Democrats pushing to abolish the Electoral College, it's nothing more than a blatant power grab. It's honestly designed to rig future elections in their favor and silence millions of Americans. As our colleague on the panel said, they know they can't, well, he didn't say this, but basically what they do is by eliminating the Electoral College, they're trying to concentrate the power into a handful of liberal, densely populated cities like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, where their base lies. And what they do is they know very well they can't win on fair terms. So their goal is to erase the voices of smaller states and rural communities, those who don't fall in line with the radical coastline agenda, basically. And this honestly isn't about, expanding democracy. What's going on is that it's an attempt to honestly undermine democracy. And I gotta say, abolishing the Electoral College would hand over the presidency to the whims of urban elites and undermine the very foundation of federalism that protects the balance of power between the states. And it's a very, very dangerous agenda that the Democrats are pushing along with Tim Walz, because they're terrified of losing the elections fair and square. And honestly, the little people in the middle are the ones that will be voiceless if that is the case. So I think the Republican, perspective is that the Electoral College absolutely is an important, critical, actually, check to have. And I have to say, there's no country on earth that I'm aware of that doesn't have some kind of checks or balances enshrined in their governing doctrine, their constitution, however they may call it. And frankly, I have to say, you'd have a situation basically where if you don't have the Electoral College, it's democracy without checks and balances, it's mob rule. And history has shown us, frankly, that this leads to chaos, instability, and even tyranny. I have to say, it would allow for America, unfortunately, to go down a dangerous path that could result in, extremist groups taking over under the guise of democracy.
Adele, you talk about the checks and balances. There is also a question of representation and fairness now. Now, how would you address the concerns about unequal representation in that particular case and the fairness in the current system then?
Absolutely. I think there is, if you look at the population density, of course, California has look, if you take California's economy, it could stand alone as its own country, basically. And it could very well, according to the GDP that it brings in, be able to break away from California, from the rest of the US. I don't think that's going to happen. There were attempts for, breaking up the state. But I think when it comes to representation, California, New York, Chicago, again, liberal enclaves. And if we're going to talk about the sheer numbers of people that come out and vote, And if we're going to take and juxtapose it against the rest of the population, of course, you take those different states and the cities specifically, and those numbers of the population based on sheer density and the population would outnumber the rest of the state. So I think that's the rest of the country, sorry. And I think that's where it comes into play, why the Electoral College is so important. It designates a number of electorates based on the population comparatively.
All right, we'll try and get a reaction from Mr. Crickley, but before that, Robert Shapiro, you have been listening very patiently. I just want to understand from you, the biggest criticism for Electoral College system, it is, is undermining the popular vote. What, according to you, are some of the disadvantages or the dangers of the Electoral College to the United States democracy, as both the Republicans and Democrats are putting it?
Well, the danger of one is simply the principle of one person, one vote. And it clearly was not the intention of the founders for the system to be set up in that fair way. They didn't care. They did not care about fairness. They cared about putting together a plan for electing the president that they could get broad support for in the Constitution. And I think both speakers have really laid out the differences. For the change to occur, watch what would happen if the Republicans lost the presidential election because they lost the electoral vote but won the popular vote. That would change. That would change the tune of Republicans. I think what we've heard really fairly represents the nature of the debate. One other characteristic of the electoral college is there's no constitutional right to vote for the electors. Okay, this has only come about through history and the states adopting that. There is no constitutional right for the voters. It's the state legislatures who determine how the electors are selected, and they've just determined that they be selected through winner-take-all elections by the popular vote. The constitutional amendment, this is almost a ridiculous discussion because getting a constitutional amendment is close to impossible. The only chance for the system to change, there's currently legislation going around in all the states in which the state legislatures would pass a law that says they will assign their electors for their state to the winner of the popular vote, meaning that if a state voted for one candidate but another candidate got the popular vote, that state would give its electoral votes to the winning candidate of the popular vote. And that in the law, it would only take effect when enough states have passed it that would enable the winner to get 270 votes. That would be contested in the courts for a variety of reasons that are too complicated here. But I think the other two speakers have laid out the issues very well.
All right, Mr. Crickley, firstly, react to what Mr. Shapiro has to say. Also, I want to understand the motivations behind these reforms. What motivates the Democrats, especially because after what Mr. Walz has said, what exactly motivates the Democrats to reform or abolish this existing system at the moment? I basically want to understand that. And how do you think it will improve the democratic process?
Sure. In terms of what motivates the Democrats, I would ask that we set aside dark conspiracy theories on the part of the Democrats to end democracy somehow. There are legitimate debates to be had that have been going on now for 2.5 centuries, roughly, about just how to balance direct democracy versus representative democracy, and the Electoral College is one of the institutions at the center of that debate. It's especially rich hearing accusations like this against the Democratic Party from the Republican Party, which is led by a man who literally tried to overthrow the last election and is in favor of terminating the Constitution at will, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know we don't need to get into that debate now. I think that the concern among many Democrats, and as I say, among some Republicans and independents as well, is this issue of the one man, one vote, or one person, one vote principle that is fundamental to American democracy. But as the founders recognize, it's very difficult to balance that kind of pure direct democracy against representative democracy and in a system that's going to be impervious to the risk of mob rule, which is a very real risk. If you have a charismatic demagogue, for example, like Donald Trump, he can become very destructive while at the same time very popular. And the founders were very concerned about that. They warned explicitly about people who have the power of popular persuasion, but a total absence of character. So it is a complicated issue. It, on the one hand, you can say, how is it fair that Hillary Clinton, for example, beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes and yet lost the election, and how Republicans have, I believe, lost the popular vote in, if I'm remembering right, 8 out of 10 of the most recent presidential elections. And with the effects of gerrymandering, which is the deliberate design of congressional districts to produce the results you want instead of fair representation, many people would argue the Republican Party is trying to work out a system in which they can win even though they lose the popular vote again and again and again. However, there is a legitimate concern about the representation of the less populous states. It is true that states like California and New York, which have enormous populations and which vote overwhelmingly Democratic, would probably get to elect the president in election after election for many years to come, and that's a legitimate concern. So this is a genuinely complicated issue. As Mr. Shapiro just pointed out, I think it's very unlikely that there's going to be a constitutional amendment of any kind in the near future, let alone one that abolishes the Electoral College. But I think this issue will keep coming up. My advice to Democrats, though, would be to, it's an interesting discussion to have, and it's an important one, but I think it's far more important to focus on winning enough votes that it's not an issue.
This is one discussion that is going to go on for some time. Unfortunately, we're running short of time at the moment. Adele Malka-Nazarian, Robert Shapiro, and Spencer Crickley, thank you very much for joining us on NDTV and having this fascinating discussion. Moving on, after civil rights groups sued Georgia in an effort to extend the state's voter registration deadline by a week to account for residents who may not have been able to register in the wake of Hurricane Helene, similar groups have now sued Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Secretary of State Corbett, asking them to reopen voter registration amid Hurricanes Helene and Milton, the League of Women Voters of Florida, and other such groups as well. Meanwhile, the authorities say that the Harris campaign office in Arizona, it has been shot at for the third time in less than a month. The shooting occurred between midnight to 1 a.m. Around the same time, the last two incidents occurred. No one was injured in any of the three shootings. The incident came just as Harris and her running mate Tim Walz prepared to head to Arizona for a rally. And we have with us Glenn Carl, former Deputy National Intelligence Officer and career CIA officer. Welcome to NDTV, Carl. My first and the most obvious question to you is, what security measures should be taken to protect Vice President Harris, along with her campaign staff, and also Donald Trump, who has also had 2 assassination attempts? Are there any concerns about the effectiveness of the current security protocols?
Well, in the wake of the second attempt to shoot or kill President Trump, the Congress passed an order that the Secret Service provide the same level of protection for candidates for the office of president as the president, him or herself, receives. So the number of Secret Service officers and the layers of protection for the 4 principal candidates have been enhanced from that date forward. Is that adequate? I've said many times, and I'm hardly unusual in this, that to quote President Kennedy, I think the day literally that he was assassinated, he said, if someone wishes to kill me, it will be possible to do. And there's no perfect layers of protection. Now, to the broader issue of why this kind of danger exists, or rather why there are increased acts of violence against political candidates' offices and so on, people shape their behavior based on the general environment. When I was a child, and this will sound silly, but it's a profoundly disturbing reality. When I was a child, there was a television program, Superman, and Superman, of course, can leap from tall buildings and fly. And a normal adult realizes that is fantasy. But in fact, numbers of people, and in particular children, because it was a children's show more than anything, were literally jumping out of windows. People do whatever the environment seems to say is normal or acceptable. In America, you have tremendous gun culture, and you have the demonization of political opponents, in particular by the Republican candidate. And therefore, numbers of people at the margins will increasingly engage in acts of violence. That's what's happening.
Absolutely. Mr. Kahl, having said that, I want to understand the impact on the campaign and what possible impact could these incidents have on Vice President Harris's campaign, and how might they also affect public perception of her candidacy?
Well, her campaign, we know that Donald Trump, after the assassination attempt, has been, I guess, obliged to speak behind bulletproof glass. And I think the president has been doing that, whatever president has been doing that for years. I suspect that either has already been the case or will be the case for the Democratic candidates, Harris and Walz. Beyond that, you have substantial Secret Service details protecting 24 hours a day the candidates. The perceptions, this just plays into the already polarized nature of this campaign in particular. And I don't see that changing, especially Harris's position or the public's view of her.
All right, Mr. Glenn Kahl, thank you very much for getting us your views on this particular topic. We are running short of time. We'll slip into a very short break now. More news and updates continue on NDTV World.
Sadly, animal cruelty has reached an appalling high. It's the worst animal rescue emergency in our recent history, and we urgently need your help. The RSPCA is the only charity in England and Wales dedicated to animals of every kind. Without us, those facing serious abuse and neglect would simply not be saved. Like you, we can't bear to think of them suffering. That's why, despite the high numbers, we must reach them before it's too late. If you can help us carry on this vital work with a monthly gift, please call or text the number on screen now. Anything you can give would help so much. It'll help us answer more calls. It'll help us rescue more animals in danger and help provide them with the urgent medical treatment, food and loving care they need. I promise we will never give up trying to save every animal we can, but we need your help now more than ever. I can assure you, your gift will help save animals' lives every day. Please call 0800 234 6025, text SAVE to 78866, or visit our website to start your monthly donation today. Thank you.
Hello there, citizens of Britain. As the autumn leaves fall and you scramble for your favourite knitted jumper, here's a little treasure trove of info for you. It's People's Postcode Lottery's noteworthy November draws. You could win a share of £23.5 million. Sign up before midnight on the 31st of October. So if we come a knock-in with a share of £23.5 million, it might just be the spark that brightens up your autumn. That'll be the neighbours at number 45. Show-offs!
This is an important message for people living with diabetes, from people living with diabetes.
When I was experiencing the symptoms of diabetes, I didn't know what was going on.
You go on the internet and it's full of horror stories. You don't know where to begin and you don't know what to believe.
I didn't understand about carbs, I didn't understand about blood glucose levels.
I was scared and I was worried.
I didn't understand diabetes full stop.
That's why the support I get as a Diabetes UK member is so important.
You can become a Diabetes UK member too. To join us now, just call 0800 144 5406 and become a member today for just £3 a month. When you do, you'll receive a practical guide specific to your type of diabetes and a copy of Balance magazine 4 times a year. Balance is filled with news and inspiring real-life stories from members just like you. And you'll receive regular emails and vital updates that will help you feel informed and supported. Plus, you'll help support research that could lead to better treatments for all types of diabetes.
Membership makes life better because you're not alone anymore.
Call 0800 144 5406 or go online to become a Diabetes UK member for just £3 a month, because membership can help you learn to live better with diabetes.
Some people think life slows down in your 50s, but I'm just getting started. And to help my lot, I have over 50s life insurance from Cover Today. They're the only over 50s life insurer with no waiting period. Unlike other insurers who can make you wait up to 2 years, with Cover Today, you're fully covered from day one. Now I'm with Cover Today, I can get on with doing something much more interesting.
To find out more, call our friendly UK team or visit covertoday.co.uk.
Hi, we're talking Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power Season 2. Joining us is the stellar star cast. A very warm welcome to NDTV.
Thank you.
So we'll start as a warm-up. We'll start with some puns. Why did Sauron start a fashion line?
To wear the one ring?
You're close, because he always rings in the trends. Okay, second one.
Yeah, no, okay.
I promise it's a better one.
Okay, yeah.
What's Sauron's favorite kind of music? This is easy, huh?
Death metal?
Heavy metal. Yeah, sure. Death metal also works.
There's heavy metal in this season, you know.
There is.
There is actually.
The troll song.
Damn Rod, sorry.
Of course, it looks absolutely intense as well. We'll start with you, Charlie. Your character, of course, has a lot of menace, and still, at the same time, it has a lot of charisma as well. A lot of people are wondering, how are you cracking that kind of balance?
I think it all has to come from an internal drive to achieve something, right? And I think the other thing, I don't really think about how things are going to be perceived.
This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
To Left, Right and Centre, I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, the final rites of Ratan Naval Tata, the industrialist with a heart of gold, were performed with full state honours at a Mumbai crematorium this afternoon. Mr. Tata, who passed away in hospital late last night at the age of 86, was revered for his visionary leadership, transforming the Tata Group into a global enterprise while maintaining ethical standards. His philanthropy, especially in education, healthcare and rural development, showcased his commitment to social upliftment. His humility, integrity and dedication to innovation and corporate social responsibility make him truly great. On the program tonight, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, Naina Lal Kidwai, Jyotiraditya Scindia, among a host of leaders and industrialists recalling their experiences with Mr. Tata. Also coming up, a huge development in the tech sector, the US government's interest in potentially splitting up Google. As reflected in various antitrust investigations and legal actions, this centers around concerns related to monopoly power, competition, and the impact on consumers and the market. Now, Google holds a dominant position in the search engine market, with estimates often citing over 90% of the global search market share. This dominance extends to other areas as well. What are the implications of Google potentially being split? It's going to be a long legal battle for sure, but we're going to be looking first up, in fact, what that's all about. The headlines at this hour. The tennis legend Rafael Nadal will retire after the Davis Cup finals next month. The 22-time Grand Slam winner, who's been on the professional circuit since 2001, took to his social media to announce the decision to call it quits owing to persistent injury problems. "48 hours after its electoral disaster in Haryana, the Congress brass in a huddle to analyse what went wrong. The warring factions of Bhupinder Hooda and Kumari Selja are not invited. A major outreach for the OBC and SC community ahead of the elections in Maharashtra. The Shinde-led Maharashtra government raises the limit of non-creamy layer from 8 to 15 lakhs, also gives a statutory status to the SC, the Scheduled Caste Commission. With the message of stronger ties, the Prime Minister says the 21st century belongs to Asia at the 21st ASEAN-India Summit in Laos. Well, coming up in a little while from now, we'll be looking at the Ratan Tata story. We'll be joined by some wonderful industrialists and friends of Ratan Tata to tell us about his life. But at this stage, we're going to talk about a big international story that impacts the tech sector, and that is the story of Google and the fact that there is a possibility, and a strong one at that, if the US government really pushes its case, that Google could be split into several smaller companies.
Anti-competitive and pernicious. These are some of the words used by the US Department of Justice to describe one of the world's biggest tech companies, Google. The US government may ask a judge to force the breakup of Google's business as it attempts to challenge the tech giant's monopoly over the internet search market, saying in a court filing that the world's biggest search engine causes pernicious harms to Americans. If the DOJ pushes ahead with the proposal and they get accepted by the judge, it would possibly be the biggest regulatory intervention in the history of big tech. The US government has been considering the move ever since a landmark court ruling in August found Google illegally crushed its competition in online search. Google has termed the proposal as radical and said they will impact numerous industries and products with significant unintended consequences for consumers and businesses. Google's monopoly in the search engine market can be gauged from the fact that it accounts for about 90% of all online searches. The US government has accused the company of using its Chrome browser and Android operating system to attract users to its search engine, where it makes money by selling advertisements. The Department of Justice has claimed the potential competitors have been unable to get a foothold in the online search market. The DOJ added this lack of competition has allowed the company to charge abnormally high prices for adverts. According to reports, the DOJ is expected to submit a more detailed set of proposals by 20th November, and there is a likelihood that Google will submit its own set of solutions by December 20th. Google's search engine is a big revenue generator for the company. This product brings in billions of dollars through advertising displayed in its results pages. How this battle between the US government and one of the biggest companies to have ever existed unfolds will decide how technology is perceived and developed in the coming generations. Vishal Vivek for NDTV World.
Well, joining us now to get a sense of what this is all about, Jessica Stone, a reporter with Voice of America in Washington. Jessica, thanks very much for being with us.
You bet. Good to be with
there were
you.
attempts made to, earlier to break the monopoly of Google by courts, and that, wasn't successful at that stage. Do we have any realistic idea on what the US government is planning? How serious are the latest observations by the Department of Justice?
Well, what you're seeing now is a series of proposals being floated. There are other options, which your report did not outline, which could be barring Google from collecting sensitive data overall, requiring it to make those search results available to other search engines as well, letting websites opt out of being part of this process because, of course, Google's AI is trained on everyone's data that's out there for searching, and making Google report to what's being termed a court-appointed technical committee. As your reporter said, we're going to get the final proposal on November 20th. We're going to get Google's response by December 20th. So it's by no means over yet. But there is a great concern on the part of the US government that this monopoly is adversely affecting what people can do, and really the future, not only the current atmosphere, but the future of artificial intelligence in particular.
Jessica, what are the key factors you think have driven the Department of Justice's scathing observations? I ask because there are all sorts of concerns. We haven't spoken about privacy, but that's one of the concerns. Yeah. Google's dominance, limiting search innovation as well. So what are some of the key concerns?
Well, you mentioned privacy, but I also mentioned artificial intelligence and the future of it, because all of this data is essentially training Google's ability to invent the next iteration of artificial intelligence. And the US government does not want them to have a monopoly on that industry. It doesn't really want anyone to have a monopoly on that industry around the world. You mentioned before that there's an estimate that about 90% of Google searches, or excuse me, internet searches are going through Google. I mean, that's a lot of data to train artificial intelligence. So a tremendous advantage to Google. Google for its part does say, hey, listen, we do have competitors. We have Amazon, we have Meta, and it's just the quality of our product that's keeping people in the loop. But remember, Google is paying for placement, and they are paying Android phones for placement on their devices, and that's automatically there. They're paying other computer systems, OSs, for the same. And so there is an argument to be made that they do have an unfair advantage in that respect.
All right, Jessica Stone, thanks very much for joining us. We're going to continue this discussion. I'm joined by Pavan Prabhat, co-founder and president at Short Hills AI, Mishi Chaudhry, who's a tech lawyer, and Tony Curzon-Price, an expert on antitrust. Tony, let me come to you first. What are the chances, realistically, of Google being split into several small companies?
I think that the chances are certainly there, and as Jessica Stone said, there is certainly some arguments for doing that. And in the language of antitrust, there's been a lot of talk of what's called self-preferencing, which is using your dominance in one place to prefer your products in another, and therefore gain an advantage, an unfair advantage there. I have to say that I think that all antitrust authorities, the EU has in various forms been after Google as well, have a real problem when it comes to the search dominance, because it's not at all clear that a breakup solves the problem. And so antitrust solutions, which came from the late 19th century, when you had companies like Standard Oil, which developed very traditional monopolies, you could solve those by breaking them up, and the law dates essentially from that. Search is a very different thing. The money that comes from search is because each individual who reveals their intention to purchase through search is valuable, and whoever owns that single individual gets the rents from it. So whether that's Google or 5 Googles or Google plus Edge plus iOS, whoever owns the eyeball and the intention at the moment extracts the monopoly rent from that. That's a very different problem from the problem that has traditionally been solved by splitting things up in antitrust.
Okay. Pavan Prabhat, would this make any difference to you or me as a user if Google gets split?
I don't think so it'll make much of a difference. I mean, for so many years, all of us have been using Gmail, Google Search for free. Maybe we'll have to shell out maybe a couple of dollars down the line, but I don't think it makes much of a difference to us.
Mishi, in terms of innovation, if Google is split, what might we actually see in the search engine space?
Well, we're already seeing a lot of different innovation. Google search has been broken for many years now. Every time you search for something, you are bombarded with sponsored links, etc. A little bit of difference you have already seen as OpenAI took over, that now with Gemini, you see certain answers to any search you put. With Perplexity, which is another AI-powered search engine, we see that the company is trying to understand where it stands in future. It is true that 90% of the search, at least in the US, is owned by Google. And everyone else has a very small share of the market. And that is not just because all of us choose Google by default, but it's there on our phones. Google pays Apple, Google Plays and Android ecosystem is owned by it, and Samsung and everyone, that the default is Google. That means whether we like it or not, we are just stuck there. Being a monopoly is not a problem. Using that monopolistic power to at least keep control of the market and the related matters, that's the issue out here. So I would say that the fact that they pay so much amount of money, which is around $26 billion to maintain this dominance also means that unless a new player comes in, there's not going to be much innovation. Until we saw OpenAI or Perplexity come in, there wasn't much improvement that was happening. So for any of the tech industry, any such regulation or force which comes from either regulators or other companies, it is good for the consumer. We want competition. That's why antitrust or competition law exists, so that we can get the best out of it and not the same company keeps giving us whatever it thinks it's right and keeps collecting data.
Tony, there's been separate examples in the United States in the past. There were cases involving AT&T in 1984, which resulted in a split or an attempt to split. Microsoft in the late 1990s. Is there any way of comparing what Google faces with what we've seen in the US in the past?
I think there is. Those are all very telling examples. Of course, there was IBM before AT&T as well. I think that one of the lessons that we need to take from that history is that the antitrust remedies tend to solve yesterday's problems. So if you think of the Microsoft case in the 1990s, this was about dominance in tying operating system with office software, just at the time when we were all moving into browsers, which made operating systems much less relevant. So it took a very long time for these antitrust remedies to come into force, and I fear, rather, as our last speaker made clear, that in a sense the fact that when the antitrust authorities are now going after search, just as AI has exploded onto the scene, and in a sense, I think for most of us who use search for research purposes, it's clear that there are now much better alternatives to Google search. So in a sense, that one of the problems with antitrust is it goes after, in these fast-moving technological markets, it goes after yesterday's problem.
Okay. Pawan, Prabhat, could we actually see wonderful opportunities for new search engines? I mean, we're all used to Google. It's second nature to us. We can't do without it, despite efforts of so many others in the search engine market. Very few actually use those, and Google just seems to dominate. But if there is a split up, and if there is a legal effort at sort of keeping Google at bay, might we see greater innovation, greater opportunities, great new technology, which actually might change the way we look at searches?
So I think already a lot of new technology, especially in AI, is because Google made their paper on transformers public and made that technology available to everyone. Similarly, we are seeing a lot of search for products is now moving to Amazon. Now, again, but there is a case that whether Amazon is abusing its position on search. So in general, I feel that even if you break up Google, it's not going to really suddenly alter the landscape. And now we say, hey, there are so many great search engines. In the past, Bing has tried everything, a lot of search engines. The reason why Google dominates is because it is a better product. I mean, still, I